teaching on Malkhut. I know last week I was sort of painting a broader picture of this whole Sefiroth relationship, but I thought I'd come back to Malkhut because there are some very important things to understand how these words are being used. They are Hebraic in nature, and we're going to go into it. The problem always to me now is I can't teach it and read it in the Hebrew. I have to have helps, but basically in the Hebrew there is so much information packed into these individual words, and then you combine them, letters make words make whole kind of worlds. So anyways, the goal of Kabbalah, I want to say this again, I want to teach this concept of the deeper Jewish mystical understandings, is because, okay, so we're down here, I'm in Malkhut. If you kind of understand this chart here, there's 10 Sephiroths. Malkhut, is down here. It is referred to as the earth, all right? Eretz. Most of the time, the earth, it is talking about this world that we live in. It is called Kabbalistically Malkhut, but it is referencing your biblical word, Eretz, earth. It's the physicality. It's referencing in its broadest sense all of physicality that we can interface with, that are actually our eyes and ears can pick up, and then what is in nature. It is actually really nature down here as we know it. But as I said last time, there is a deep Kabbalistic understanding has to do with the math too, and the way things are compacted. The 10th Sephiroth, which is always means that there's 9 other Sephiroths above it compacted into it. So, and that is true for every, so all the different levels. So here in Malkhut, it's important to understand, we have 9 things going on in the invisible realms. Who knew? Okay, but if you knew Hebrew and the Torah, the way they keep it, it is kept there. So this is why I understand, this is where we are, this world of physicality. And I'm going to unpack a lot of these different words. There's a lot of relationships that Malkhut has with all the other Sephiroth and the special role, so to speak, of Malkhut. What was the whole point? But the goal of Kabbalah, one of the goals, is I'm going to continue to flush this out as I started with Yesod last week. The real problem area that has to be corrected by Elohim in this whole drama of redemption, down here in this Sephirothic area, which is in the world of Ruach, the soul category, our Ruach, which is our emotional life, all right? We're a body, a soul, and a spirit. The body is down here in Malkhut. Our lower soul life, which is akin to our Ruach, is here. It is influenced by these lower Sephiroth of Hod, Netzach, and Yesod. All right? And this is our emotion. It's why this is the watery in the lower waters. And it says emotions. When Reuben was said he was emotion, he was unstable as water. His character was unstable as water. He had not mastered his carnal passions that reside in this level of Ruach and in the soul, the world of Yetzirah. And this is really the world that Yeshua came to rectify, because it's this world that cut us off. So this is why, and Malkhut is the bride, it's another one of the understandings, is separated from her groom, which is Tiferet, which is up here in the center of the whole heaven. So the bride marrying the groom is all depicted in this. So these relationships, there's myriads and myriads and myriads, but I want to touch on some of the major ones. So this is what's important to understand. Now, in the Malkhut is also feminine. Remember I told you, Hebrew half letters are feminine, half of them are male. Well, it's specific because it's explaining a dualistic system of male and female. The left side is female. The right side is the male. Actually, the right side and the middle pillar are the male markers, so to speak. And from Bina on the left side here into Malkhut, these are the feminine. Now, and there's a whole bunch you can say about that, but what I do want to say is Malkhut is on the side here of the left side. That's why a lot of times why they do the moon as the light that rules this right between Yesod and Malkut is the moon, which is the lower light, the lesser, but it's half the time it's in darkness, it's in night. It's not a pure bright light like the sun. There's kind of this that she is under siege. The bride is in distress, and she really is, because she's constantly being hounded. I mean, this is sort of what's built into the storyline. That's why they use some of these stories and anthropomorphic and things, because they're telling it in a story way, which I don't have a problem with. So anyways, it is this world in here, which is our lower soul life, all right? But they're very closely related. So the thing is that between the Ruach, our Nefesh, and down here, Asiyah, and our Nefesh and our Ruach in the world of Asiyah, in the world of Yetzirah here, are so closely linked because they're right next to each other. So, but what the Torah is trying to get us to do, the Torah is trying to get us to rectify what has happened, that this is now the operating program. The lower, I said, the lower carnal level programs in us that equate us with the animals that run is what is our first responder. The whole system got a little bit mixed up, and instead of our mind being our first responder and we tell our mind tells everything, including our body parts, what to do. No, we got this problem that it's our body is the one that's always trying to tell us. It's an interesting, and what is so interesting about this, and let me digress here, psychology is not new. Freud didn't invent anything. Modern psychology, this is part of the repackaging. Psychology is the hugest part, one of the largest understandings that is couched in Kabbalah understanding, because it's part of our invisible world, our soul life. There's tons of information about our soul life, and it's very connected to the ethical qualities of the different Sefirot. So that's why truth, if you look at the names of these, I haven't really gotten to that. Truth, wisdom, understanding, might, and power. These are some of the attributes. This is very tied into the concept of good midos. But my point is, the Torah will help us to have a guideline, a boundary, and help us to rectify our souls in this category. So if you have a problem with jealousy, well, the Torah has an antidote. This is about if you're stealing, sexual, it gives you your boundaries, so that your thoughts, is covetousness a good way to be thinking about somebody? Is unforgiveness a good way to have? No. So the Torah is giving us a whole way of rectification for this level of our soul life that is really under siege. And that's what Paul's always saying, the things that I shouldn't do, I do, because sometimes you can't, because you got this first responder for this body that we care. So anyways, so this is one of the goals that because we need to operate our souls from this triad up here, which is our neshama soul life. It's our spirit. It's the part of us that is connected to the higher Godhead, where truth, the eternals are, like the eternal Torah. So this is where this is different. That's kind of paradise. That's where, the Mashiach hanging out okay. I mean, it all fits. This is a very huge description of the heavenly throne room. It's so unbelievable. It's exactly where it's supposed to be, and all the relationships. It's an incredible system. But what is so important is that, so we do have this problem. This is what gives a lot, why the body gets a bad rap, and even more so in the Gnostic, right? Because we do have to do a rectification. You cannot, and that if your body is your first responder and you don't have a Torah boundary, well, that's called lawlessness. That's the whole problem there. Okay, so one of the other things I want to say, getting into Malkut, earth physicalities. Okay, it is in the West. There's all these clues that I have been always talking about, that they code in the Kabbalah, code words, because we are talking about a huge cosmos of many dimensions. Now you have to stop and think, when Daniel or whatever he taught the Magi, where they were able to plot the heavens and not just find a star, but understand the time in the cycle when the story, because this gets so complicated. It's written in story, sound, and text. There's a story attached to everything, and that's why things happen in their season, because you don't put the ending at the beginning. You got to wait for the ending at the end. I hope that it's very logical. So anyways, story is a big part of how prophecy unfolds, when it is time for that piece of the puzzle to come by. But there is always partial fulfillment, because we're always cycling around the same Sefiroth tree of life is always cycling around itself. Anyways, I was going to go into this concept of the foundations in Malkhut, because there's, all right, so this is visible, all this is invisible, but the way in which it's coded so that you can understand what world you're in, where in the quadrant you are. Directions is huge. So the west, well, we immediately know the west is Malkhut. The west on the Sephirothic chart is down here at the bottom at the feet. Now that the west is used, I said like the east is always used in a sense of the beginning, because the sun, they base it on actual physical things. The sun rises in the east, good place to start. The sun sets in the west, a good place to have your endings. So prophecy, when it says that Ephraim, it was so interesting, because the prophecy that it says in the last days that bulks of people from Ephraim, Benjamin, and what's the other? Manasseh, Ephraim, and Benjamin are the three tribes that are camped down here, which aligns, trust me, on the chart with Malkut. They are the harvest at the end of the age. Isn't that interesting? All right. They're not making up any of these connections. The people who are writing our text are very tapped into the system, and they never deviate. This is how they're able to pass it down so accurately. Okay, so it is in the West, the four elements. Now, something that's really, I'm beginning to understand, in the relationships, it's all about relationship in the Sephiroth, which is really just one, let's not get crazy, one body of Elohim here, but he has many parts. Like, so if I was going to teach you anatomy, and I was going to start with, okay, I got a head, and I was going to start to put up all these diagrams, what the head does, and I was going to go to the hand and tell you everything the hand does, and then I was going to give you, open up and give you all the systems inside. It's exactly the same thing, okay? So that's right. That's why the feet are at the bottom, because it's the bottom of the, things start at the top. The head is usually the top. The feet are always on the ground. We don't walk around with our head. So they're very logical. You put the feet at the bottom on the ground. So whenever you're talking about things that are happening in absolute physicality, we can make, and there's a lot of references. If you look at it, feet, when you understand the deeper understanding, it's like, oh yeah, I get it. We are down here. This is definitely an apart. It's definitely a remez. No. It would definitely be a Peshat reference too, because each of these represents one of the four levels of parts, okay? So again, on that level, Malkut is right down there in Peshat, which is the literal level. So it's all, it's all tracking on each other. But the four elements, there's kind of these phrases in the Bible that talks about the four elements were formed out of the dust of the ground, which in a lot of the other more pseudographic is, kind of breaks it down to the four elements: wind, air, wind, fire, and earth, okay, which I'm starting to teach on a little more specifically. And then you have the four winds, and they're different. I mean, come on, this in the Hebrew, you can't play games, you can't go switcheroo. Four elements or four winds for Ruach, that's different. Why the female? This is because you have Yod Hey Vav Hey. It's a very important, which is the middle pillar here. But Hey and they call it Yod Hey, the first Hey, Vav, and then the second Hey refers to Malkut. They're female. Hey, anybody knows they're female, all right? So there's two females personifications in the Sephirothic understanding here, but also this whole left side is considered female. I've been enough of the feminine. We're not talking about gender. We are talking about really, on one level, the functionings of the brain, left brain, right brain systems. We're talking about on and off, vessel and light. There's all these systems that is being really kind of described in a yin and a yang kind of way, all right, in that. But it is important to understand that the feminine is built into this, and we have to understand what they're talking about, and elevate our words and our practices, and our understandings. Now, back to this area here. This is where, again, where we're studying, a lot of people today, our problem is we have cut ourselves off from all the metaphysical worlds, all right? Secularly, you can't even, all right, have the discussion. It's 100% all they want to talk about is what's down here in the world of physicality. And this, you know, to most people, well, I mean, I rejected that concept early on because I already figured out, well, no, there's a lot more here than meets the eye. And so I don't think as many people have bought into that, but they don't know how else to express something different. And our Jewish mystical texts give us all the information we need to rightly divide our body, soul, and spirit and understand all the relationships with the Hebrew words and to plug into the verses correctly and get better translations. First off, it'll give us much better translations. I feel bad for a lot of these translators because so much has been lost. Anyways, so going back, let me say the 4 elements. This area is where we're made up of our physicality. And there, believe it or not, there's a lot the Torah says. This is the whole thing with the dietary laws. There's a lot of principles and how cleanliness, holiness, how to keep yourself in your bodily sphere down here in this world of Asiyah, how to keep free of the negative energies that are at physicality in down here. And there's a lot to it. This is what we've never really, a lot of people have never understood when they look at the Old Testament and they're like, oh, what's up with all these? They don't understand. It is probably, and that's what most of us are starting to go back to that because it works. There's a lot of sense to it. And it is Yahweh telling us, hey, I'll give you all the tips you need for help. This is why I said these scenes were known, not only for the book, having the secret books or the books for the wise, having the names, the angels, which I'm going to get to that one too. And they had all the herbal. They understood the relationship of plant-based living with me. Believe me, they did. I want to say this out for anybody who listens. When I discovered the meat thing, meat was really only done on special occasions. You never ate meat daily. This was you took it to the priest. You know, so maybe once a week you would have a Shabbat dinner with meat. It was much rarer, and it was always usually done around an offering. So that just would go a long way, in my opinion, to understand it's not meat, it's not either or. It's just that we're way out of balance. Meat is not our primary get-to, but it is definitely a step up in feast and festival and holiday, in Shabbat, in all the gatherings of Israel. And that is a fact. So anyway, sorry. Going back to Malchut here. We're over here, okay, on the elements. The 4 winds is referring to these are invisible. This is our soul life up here. So the 4 elements is talking about our physicality, where it comes from, but it's much even science. I mean, it's really telling you the science of it all, but we're electromagnetic and biochemical. So then our soul life is coming from these upper invisible worlds. So there's all these relationships are built in, but today it's kind of sad because we're totally cut off. We won't even go back and examine the ancient wisdom, which totally, I'm talking about, I believe that the Jewish ancient wisdom is the purest stream. Absolutely. That's the narrative I'm doing. Okay, let's keep going down here. Darkness and night. It's equated a lot of times the earth, like I was saying, because with the moon, we know from the archetype of the moon that there are seasons of great brightness and calm, but then there's clouds and darkness. The moon is a very iffy light source because so there's a lot. That's why there's a lot built into the understanding of the moon and why they use it allegorically. Whereas the sun is always bright and shining and not just totally out of our, we could never affect the sun. But there is a concept more that the moon is much closer. The feminine too, again, it's feminine, much closer. And it represents more, Elohim represents more the concept of immanent nature, of Elohim's immanent closeness to us, okay? Just larger, broader brushes to paint with. The evil inclination, the Yetzirah hara, okay? This is a whole, I've done some teachings, this is kind of a way that we really need to get familiar with this concept, and where, what happened in the earth plane and right here between Yetzirah, or we'll say between the Nefesh and the Ruach, these things, why it got flipped, like I've been saying. But it says in the story that that's where we got infected. That's where this evil inclination comes from. All right. When Eve, this is part of the whole story, the bigger picture of when Eve and the Nakash created a new hybrid kind of race of, that was not part of the storyline. That created a being that had, and they say two, there's actually three. It's pretty deep the way that, I mean, sometimes the Hebrews parse it out so much, the Jews, but you know, we know we have one, but two evil inclinations, and there are two Yetzirahs. You have a good side, remember, it's a tree of knowledge of good and evil. There's a system in place where this, the whole system is so that you can choose good or choose evil. And it's always present. There is always two ways. There are always two sides. There's always two choices, always two paths. I mean, that's why we're always, you know, that's why finding peace is so important in the human psyche. Because when you have Yeshua, this is one of the major, it's like it's settled. You have peace. And a lot of those, you can even get settled because you come to Torah, you begin to understand, and you get a righteous standard. And, you know, and it gets easier and easier, but that is part of what's going on in the larger picture. See, a lot of this relationship with Shekinah, that's a big word. Malkhut is equated with Shekinah. On the other side, in a more spiritual application, Shekinah is known as the soul. See, the Jews, in Jewish understanding, there's totally a marriage, so to speak, of the bride and the groom. Shekinah and Tiferet. It's completely understood. That's where the early writers got it from. Of course, it's a totally Jewish concept. But it's more concerned, their understanding is that we, I think, in our understanding as a Christian, that you physicalize it too much, so to speak. Okay, Yeshua came to save our soul, because it's our Yetzirah, and give us and plug it back in rightly with our Neshama. So our whole operating systems, these lower three, our body, our soul, and our spirit, because this is a spirit, this is the soul, are all functioning. You know, you want to just be able to function without conflict, without inner turmoil, without like, oh my gosh, you know, and you want to be strong and vital. These are all the things that getting in alignment and harmony is what it's talking about with all this. Anyways, Shekinah is known as God's presence. It's called the kingdom. All right. And it's feminine because a lot of it too is there's a passivity of this. The concept is that Shekinah, if you look at this thing, there's a flow from the top. The whole concept is it's a flow of an emanative process into physicality. And it's beautiful, and everything is beautiful in its time. But so it's all coming down, and it's coming down to here. So she receives anything. This is why a lot of times, even in the scene writings, they call themselves the poor ones. Well, because they're equating themselves with Shekinah, and she doesn't have anything of her own per se. Her own separate. It's like the moon gets all its light from the sun. The Sefiroth, the Malkut, just everybody dumps into her, so to speak. All right, into this physicality. So in a ways, you know, she has everything, but she has nothing of her own. So because these all separate, you know, have their own, but that gets into a lot of it. But that's kind of the understanding, just to touch on that, all right? When it's talking about the female, all right, when in our text talk about the female, all right, very specifically, the queen, the bride, the daughter, the princess, okay, they're in there. And it's talking about this relationship between Bina and Shekinah, or the mother and the daughter, or the first hay or the second hay. All right. And it's talking about this relationship and the restoring of the female, you know, back into right relationship, like getting rid of the problem areas. And, you know, this is what Mashiach, he came to rescue his bride, you know, because every time she would try to come up, and you ever try to get close to Father and your emotions get in the way, you know, all the way up to, you start thinking about, oh my gosh, I forgot to do that, and I got to pay that bill, and I got to do this, and you just have so much, I'm getting all the clutter out. See, it's psychology of the mind. This is so real, but at the same time, you can't make about just psychology, which a lot of Torah teachers are doing today, which is unfortunate, because in it is all the information of all the worlds, the souls, the angels, and the demons that inhabit those different realms. And if you don't put the two together, it's like, then you just don't have a complete picture, and you just don't understand. So anyway, that's my opinion. All right. So that's why Shekhinah is, the divine feminine is a very important principle to restore. All right, because we are part of the bride. We are part of it, and that is like this. And what talks about the pool of shalom. It's represented that there's a place. I mean, they have it so specific, even graphing it on a grid. When I get to the math, Zion, which has been lifted up off the earth. Zion is no longer. It's in a spiritual plane right between Yesod and Malkut, and that's where all the souls. So there's a paradise before we get up for the souls before they get taken up to paradise. I mean, I should stop there. There's just a lot of relationships. It doesn't stop because, I don't know, until the Father comes, we have a lot of, and the sages have had a lot of time on their hands to come up with to flesh out the beautiful relationships and correspondence and what is deeply going on. Because I will tell you, our Torah has plenty to say about the physical world, the physical body, and how we are to conduct ourselves, a lot, okay? But it has just as much to say about this world of Yetzirah, the world of our emotions, the world of our desires, and this is where it goes into lust or all the sins. You have the sins of the flesh, then you have the desires, all right, so of life, and then you have, and we need to tap in and begin to operate strictly from our neshama soul, which is from the throne room. So this is the whole, what they're saying. In this area, we're on the throne. See, this is, and in Malkhut, we're on the throne to the point you got to kick this ego out. That's, the one thing Freud did have right, in the sense that we do have a battle. He would call it the id, the ego, super ego, and we have this battle. But there is a certain extent. We have to put Yahweh Elohim back on the throne room of our hearts. And then our mind, our heart, and our body will be in alignment. So I hope you enjoyed that. Shalom, shalom. And this is an exciting time, but I will ask the reiteration. It said, holiness, good midos, correcting your soul level is what Torah is all about. Mysteries are great, and I love it, but we need to be Torah keeping so the world can see that come to our light. Shalom.